Get underway, folks, in about one more minute. So if you have time to refresh your tea or coffee or glass of water, now would be that time. All right, well let's get underway. So if you've tuned in this morning for a town hall on Bill 212, you are in the right place. And if you are frustrated that you applied to depute officially to the Ontario Legislature Standing Committee on Heritage, Infrastructure, and Cultural Policy and didn't get a chance to, well, this is your chance. For the next 2 hours, we're going to have an opportunity to talk about Bill 212, how it is falling short, in my opinion. A little editorialism off the top here. Maybe there'll be some debate, which is totally fine and welcome. But in my opinion, how it falls short on many fronts, but notably on the issue of road safety in our streets. So why don't I just offer a few framing issues off the top? But you know what? Here I go, straight into the bill. I should have begun in a better way. I want to begin by acknowledging where I'm sitting. I'm sitting at 109 Catherine Street, which is the community office in which I'm privileged to serve with other colleagues. And the office that we live in is run by the Centertown Citizens Ottawa Corporation, one of the biggest nonprofit housing providers in Ontario. And it's on the unceded and unsurrendered territory of the Algonquin and Anishinaabe peoples, whose friendship we are very grateful for, and the responsibilities we have to them and walking that actual road of reconciliation. I believe that's what we're doing today in speaking truth and trying to grapple with how we keep each other safe in our communities as we try to move around our communities. So for the record, I want to thank our friends in Anishinaabe Algonquin communities for their friendship, for the lessons they teach us all the time about how to look after each other and look after the land. Also, just want to say off the top that this is a session that we are hosting for community members to engage with me as the critic for public transportation and for active transit. But it's also a space where if we disagree in this town hall, which is fine, fair, important, that we do so within a context of respect. And any intolerant speech or hateful speech in the course of the next 2 hours will not be tolerated. You'll be removed from the webinar. But our experience is disagreement, controversy is important. It fuels creative thinking, and it fuels an opportunity for us to provide good advice to the legislature. And that's what we intend to do next week. Okay, now, having said those things off the top, let's jump into the crux of why we're here. I think we're here. We're here because there's a bill before the House, Bill 212, and this bill has 4 schedules. One of the most talked about of it is the ability the government is proposing for itself to be essentially an editorial committee for municipal active transportation infrastructure. So we're a municipality, the 440 odd municipalities in Ontario, were they to want to build an active transportation lane, bike lane in their community, and if it were placed something that we would actually deem to be parking or vehicular traffic, the municipality needs to get the provinces say before they construct such infrastructure. That is proposed in this legislation. And the rationale for which is, according to the Premier and his government, that this is what the people want. People are tired of traffic congestion, and what we're expecting, what we've already heard, is the government to make the case that this bill, this particular schedule of the bill, is necessary in order to deal with traffic congestion. I actually happen to think that the evidence says a rather different story, that the evidence shows us that active transportation and ensuring safe ways for people to get around communities reduces traffic. Promoting public transportation is a way to take people out of cars too. And so active transportation infrastructure, public transit, these are things that are good for drivers, but unfortunately posed in this legislation is the argument that it's detrimental. So I hope we have a lively discussion of that today. And what I hope we also hear today are stories of people who themselves have not felt safe getting around our communities, because I think it's important we keep that in mind as we debate this. But this bill, Bill 212, is not just about active transportation infrastructure. It's also about Highway 413 and arteries like it carving through the greenbelt. This is a debate that we have seen in farming, environmental, civic-minded communities who frankly are fed up with the nonsense that we need to pump billions of dollars into unnecessary new highways instead of repurposing or using what we have, like taking trucks off the 407 or allowing trucks to go on the 407 and off the 401. I mean, there's lots of innovative solutions. So Bill 212 has been, and with this, I will throw to other folks to contribute at this point, but I'll just say as I end this off the top summary of Bill 212, Bill 212 is introduced in a manner in the legislature that's known as time allocation. So what that's done is truncate debate and discussion, both in the House for me and my MPP colleagues, but also at committee level. There were dozens and dozens and dozens of people that sought to depute to this bill, and a fraction of that amount were able to actually do so. And the same is true for the actual debate of this bill. So we're creating this space on purpose to make sure that you get your say, because your opinion matters to us. We're going to be transcribing what's said here that will help guide my contributions to this debate, and also my very good friends, Jennifer French, who's our critic for infrastructure, who I understand will be joining us today, and MPP Jessica Bell from University of Rosedale, who is the former NDP critic for active transportation. So, and I hope we have other friends join. I hope we have a great crowd today to have a wonderful discussion and to listen to you. All right. So with that, I would like to pass the mic across the Zoom box to a good friend and someone who's well known to people who've been advocating for road safety, Jess Speaker for Families and Friends for Safe Streets. Jess, I just want to say for the record how appreciative I personally am for all you have done to try to talk sense into the province, all parties, all caucuses. What's on your mind, Jess, when you're looking at Bill 212? Over to you.
Thank you, MPP Hardin. And I just want to say right back at you, I appreciate so deeply all the support that you've provided, and like you've literally put your life on the line biking from Ottawa to Toronto to support the vulnerable road user law, and that really means a lot. So thank you, much appreciated. What's on my mind with this bill is how many people are guaranteed to be killed if the 3 cycle tracks and complete streets in Toronto are ripped out, and if municipalities, of which there are 444 in Ontario, as far as I know, are prohibited from building complete and safe streets. I did the numbers, I crunched some statistics, and I can share with everybody that if we go back to previous rates of road violence on the 3 streets in Toronto, we can expect 9 people to be killed, 92 people to receive life-threatening and life-ruining injuries. We can expect 14,682 crashes to occur, which might be not severe, ranging from fender benders to catastrophic. And we can expect 2,006 people to receive injuries of some nature, ranging between minor and life-threatening, which is an insane amount of damage and carnage. And that's only on 3 streets. To think of going back to that, and to think of other municipalities not being able to make strides to save their own residents' lives, that's incredibly disturbing, because I know from all of my colleagues in this group, Friends and Families for Safe Streets, who have lost loved ones, that the anguish and the grief that are unleashed on you in the aftermath are unbearable. And it's so perverse and shocking and jaw-dropping and flabbergasting that this government, that any government, would actively take steps that will guarantee violent death to innocent people. That I don't even have words for how mind-boggling and disturbing that is. So that's what's on my mind, thinking about the future victims that this is guaranteed to create, and also given the increased rates of ridership, is probably going to be even worse than what I said. And I'm thinking of the family of the 24-year-old who was killed on Bloor near Avenue this summer. Because there was a dumpster blocking the cycle track. If that cycle track had been continuous and better designed, she'd still be alive. And all of the people who have lost loved ones, this is such a slap in the face to us. It's hard to put into words how hard it is to take.
Fair enough, Jess. Fair enough. Do you mind if I ask you a question before I throw it open to someone else?
Absolutely.
So you come at this, as many people perhaps know, but some tuning in may not know. You come to this from lived experience. This happened to you. I'm wondering if you wouldn't mind just telling folks what happened to you and why you're inspired to be part of a road safety movement as we try to talk sense into the government over Bill 212.
Yeah, I'd be happy to, and thanks for reminding me. I was T-boned on my bike in 2015 by a reckless SUV driver, and she almost killed me. She broke my spine in half, and there was also like what's called comminuted fractures. So not only was it fractured in half laterally, but there were other spiraling fractures coming off of that fracture. She inflicted a moderate traumatic brain injury, which still haunts me today. And she mangled my left side that she hit so badly that I developed a huge blood clot in my left leg, and my femoral vein. And then a huge piece of that clot broke off and it went through my heart, and then it landed across both lobes of my lungs, obstructing most of the blood passages on both sides. That's called a massive bilateral pulmonary embolism, and those are very often fatal. However, at the time, I was biking 60 to 70 kilometers a day, and I was in the best shape I'd ever been in my life, which is probably why I'm not dead. And that was all taken away from me, and it shattered my identity. I'm not the person that I used to be, and I don't really feel like I'm living the life I was supposed to live. This is not what I was born for. Although having purpose doing this advocacy is very important to me in the aftermath of all of this. It was devastating, and it shattered any sense of belonging, and it wrecked my mental health, and on and on and on. So I'm not having a good time in the aftermath of all of this, and nobody does who survives this. It's awful. And what's especially difficult is that it's 100% preventable. It's so easy and cheap to prevent. And yet to get politicians on board at the municipal level, now at the provincial level, the Conservatives, even before them, the Liberals, to actually just do the simple things that save lives that we have to work so hard for decades is so hard to understand why people don't care more than that.
Fair
Thank you.
enough, Jess. Thank you for sharing that again. And before we throw, I know you're organizing a very important event tomorrow in Toronto. We do have some people who'll be tuning in today from Toronto. Do you want to quickly promo that so folks can come?
I do. Tomorrow, Sunday, November 17th, we're meeting in front of the Queen's Park Legislative Building on the South Lawn, meeting at 4:30, starting the event at 5. The event is called the World Day of Remembrance for Road Traffic Victims. It's a worldwide event recognized by the UN, remembering and honoring everybody who's been killed and severely injured in preventable collisions, not only locally, but also around the world. It is one of the highest death tolls that exists, and it's the leading unintentional injury killer of youth around the world. We just let this happen to children. It's horrible. So if people want to come between 4:30 and 5 to the South Lawn of Queen's Park tomorrow, we'll have candles, we'll have posters. It's going to be a solemn ceremony of remembrance, and we will conclude with a candlelit walk around the building to encircle it with light, and we don't let the darkness win.
Right on. Words to live by. Jess, thank you for being the amazing, tenacious person you are. And thank you for sharing what you shared today. I want to throw it open to the Zoom boxes here. Who else would like to jump in and offer your perspective on Bill 212 or road safety in general, or any other aspect with respect to this bill? The floor is open. And you'll note Ethan's remark there to the chat about raising your hand if you know that function. Because of my techno peasant status, I'm often known to lift my hand. So if that's what you prefer to do in your camera song, we can find you that way too. All right, I see P.E. Jones with a hand up. Go ahead if you can just open your microphone, and Ethan, if you could facilitate that, that would be great.
Hi, this is Pamela in Ottawa. Can you hear me?
I sure can, Pamela. Nice. Thank you for joining us.
That's great. I'm pleased you're doing this. I have a couple of, I'll say, big picture questions.
Sure.
First one is, how do we make the kind of noise as was done for the green belt to get Doug Ford to back off? And the second question is, when talking with other people about bike lanes, how do we respond to the counter from other people that most people don't cycle in winter?
Well, these are great questions, Pamela. I'll take a stab at the first one, and then I might just ask Jess to chime in with the evidence on the Toronto statistics. And we're somewhat familiar here in Ottawa. You're an Ottawa person with the Ottawa statistics. So um, I would invite people to consider this. This is my opinion. I think the government, this is a government that's under criminal investigation by the RCMP. Let's not forget, for the Greenbelt fiasco that you named. And you asked very pertinently, how do we get back there? How do we put this government on the back foot in a more cautious position and not so aggressive, promoting very dangerous legislation as they're doing with Bill 212? It's an excellent question. My opinion is the government really wants us to wade in to this particular debate and say bike lanes are fantastic, cars are terrible, people who drive cars are terrible. They want to drive wedges between motorists and cyclists and pedestrians. And I would invite us to consider that our strength, if we want to emulate that Greenbelt movement strategy, is to bring people together. That Greenbelt movement brought together farmers, environmentalists, people who live downtown, people who live in the suburbs, people in the rural parts of Ontario. It galvanized folks around the issue of alleged corruption. And the RCMP is investigating this matter. This is very serious. And the government literally removed, I was there when they did it, they removed the bill that was driving this from the floor of the House, and they put in a new bill to safeguard Greenbelt properties. I mean, there's some debate about that, about how safeguarded the properties actually are. And that's valid, particularly given what we're seeing in this particular bill too. However, that's what I would offer you, Pamela, to consider, and for all of us to consider, is the government, to some extent, is inviting people into a trap it is laying. And that trap is to try to pit road users against each other. I myself, I most of the time, all year, I get around Ottawa on a bicycle, but our family also owns a car. I like to walk. You know, maybe because of some of the sports I've played in my life, I'll be in a wheelchair one day, in a power scooter, getting around that way too. Like, I think what brings us together is the fact that we all want to get home safely. Regardless of the transportation choice we use, we want to get home safely. And the number I forgot to mention, Pamela, which is really pertinent because the bike ride I did from Ottawa to Toronto that Jess was talking about, that all of those conversations we had with people along the way led me to review the statistics for collisions in Ontario that the Ministry of Transportation puts out. And what they found for the last reportable year in 2023 was, in that year, there were 49,106 serious injuries or fatalities caused by reckless driving. 49,106. So that's a rate of 134 a day, you know, spread out across 356 days of the year. I mean, that is an alarming number. As Jess said, it's one of the major reasons why people are losing their lives or being critically injured around the world. So I think the more we can put this debate, my opinion, into the basket of road safety for everyone, making sure everybody gets home to their loved ones, everybody's safe getting around our communities, and then how do we design our communities to make that happen? What do we encourage for that to happen? We're on safer ground. But if Doug Ford decides on Monday to declare his continued war against cyclists and our cycling community responds with vitriol against drivers, I think that's the response he wants. That's my guess. But Jess, do you want to fill in? Because I know there's been a lot of advocates in Toronto, and maybe other folks can chime in from the Ottawa perspective. I'm not sure if Florence is here yet from Bike Ottawa, but a lot of the research around how many people are cycling all year, including the winter, has been really interesting to note. So I'll throw it back to you, Jess.
Thank you. Here in Toronto, we have really excellent bike share statistics to draw upon. So we know that bike share use in the winter has doubled since 2022, which is only 2 years ago. And the whole system is expected to have over 6 million rides this year. So we have those statistics for this city. I'm not sure if there's anything analogous to that in Ottawa. And you could also ask how well the cycling infrastructure is cleared of snow, because often people don't ride in the winter because they cannot trust that their municipality has properly cleared their infrastructure with the same level of attention that they pay to car lanes. So that's another significant obstacle to us. And there's always the whataboutism of, well, you don't see a lot of kids on playgrounds in the winter. Maybe we should rip those out and pave them over. Just because ridership decreases in the winter is not an argument to rip it out, because to rip it out is to get people killed. So anytime you're fighting against safe streets or arguing to take out infrastructure, you are arguing for more violence and death.
Well said. Well said. What I would add, Pamela, from the Ottawa perspective is we sadly we don't have a bike share program in Ottawa. We've advocated for one for a long time, but we are working to expand our infrastructure. And you do see people riding all year round. You do see increasingly people riding all year round. And I would actually turn our attention to a great city 2 hours down the highway from us in the province of Quebec, Montreal. Valérie Plante, the mayor of Montreal, has been responsible for the single biggest expansion of active transportation infrastructure in North America. Like, it is massive. If people have visited Montreal lately, to see the capacity with which you can get around that city by using active transportation lanes, particularly bicycles. And those lanes, the mayor told me personally, are cleared at the same time as the roads are cleared. There are dedicated plows to make sure. And Montreal is as snowy as our beautiful city here in Ottawa, believe me. For those of you who live there, you have loved ones or family members or friends there, you know. So we can prep our communities, as Jess is saying, to make sure there are choices available for people, which are good for reducing congestion. They're also, we haven't mentioned yet, they're great for the planet. They're great to make sure that we're doing right by our climate emissions and ensuring there's a livable future for generations to come. All right. I hope that answered your questions, Pamela. Is there anything
I'm
we
going to
missed?
say thank you both for those answers. It's got to be about 50 years ago when I lived in Montreal. I remember going from A to B on my bicycle for some kind of rally that said we wanted to be able to cycle. So it can have a long lead time. In terms of Ottawa, I do have a colleague who cycles everywhere. And we always used to say to her, "You're nuts, it's icy." But her only accident to my knowledge, she was hit by a bus that was turning a corner.
Oh,
Yeah, in daylight. Happily, it just bumped her and schmucked her bike, but didn't really do lasting damage to her. So I appreciate that many people do cycle in winter. I end up walking because, you know, I just don't trust leaving my bicycle places. So
no,
thank
that's
you.
absolutely fair. You're welcome, Pamela. And what I would also direct you to, and others who are interested in winter cycling, is that there are online learning modules about that. There are best practices here in Ottawa, Bike Ottawa and Enviro Center. They both do forums. I think Cycle Toronto is here on our call. Allison Stewart and other friends there, maybe Families and Friends for Safe Streets, do trainings about how to bike safely in the winter. There are really important steps you can take to keep yourself safe. Which is important. We certainly don't want anybody to be in an unsafe situation. I'm sorry to hear about what happened to your friend there. That sounds really really difficult. My goodness. All right, I'm going to ask if anybody else would like to chime in at this point. I'm looking at the attendee list for hands up. The floor is open.
Joel,
Yeah.
we have a question in the Q&A that I can read out.
Oh, please and thank you.
Okay, cool. So it says, do you expect Ford to also remove other obstacles to fast cars like speed bumps, stanchions, speed limits, wide sidewalks, etc.?
That's a really great question. Who asked the question, Ty?
Tom Trottier.
Oh, hey, Tom. Okay, so I'll be honest, I haven't heard it, but when it comes to trying to pit people against each other, I have learned to expect a lot from this government. They really do enjoy finding ways to appeal to frustration. And let's be honest, like when we're going around our community here in Ottawa, and I'm sure it's the same in Toronto, Jess, I mean, there is massive congestion. It's not nothing. I mean, we've had kind of the triple impact of our city here of having a return to office protocol for employees for the federal government, 3 days a week being mandatory. So that announcement was made. $120 million cut in public transit and 74,000 fewer service hours in our city. So public transit is less reliable. So what are people doing? They're jumping in cars, taxis, or Ubers, and the streets are absolutely clogged. So the government is finding a very opportunistic moment here for them, as people are frustrated, to tell them they can get to where they need to go faster if they would only support the legislation to forbid future bike lanes because they have to go through the premier, or, as we're hearing rumors, there would be further regulations to Bill 212 that would be retroactive, that would actually say, we're going to rip up existing bike lanes here in Ottawa on O'Connor or on Laurier Street, or in Toronto on Bloor, on University. That is the kind, sadly, that's the kind of rhetorical game that the premier has played. So would they be removing speed bumps or bollards? It would be within the same vein of fake culture war arguments. So I wouldn't put it past the government to do that, but it's not in this bill now, just for the record. Jess, anything I missed there?
I just wanted to point out that in Toronto, the large majority of our car congestion issues are related to provincial construction of our Ontario line subway that's coming in. So like the province is building and causing this, and now they're turning around and trying to punish us for something that they caused. It's all a little hard to understand how they could be so hypocritical. That just came to mind, sorry.
Yeah, no, for sure. And because Ty mentioned the comments, I'm looking through the comments here. I'm seeing Brian's comment. So you're asking if the Ford government has presented any evidence in support of the contention that bike lanes are a significant contributor to automotive gridlock and that restricting them would ease gridlock. Second, has the government given any indication of how it would handle the bureaucratic load, having to analyze and decide on applications for permission to build new bike lanes, potentially from hundreds of municipalities in the province? I hate to tell you, Brian, the answer to your questions are no and no. No and no. The government has, if you follow ministers of the government and what they post on social media and what they say in their media conferences, they keep referring to a couple of things of which I'm aware. Just maybe you can clarify if there's more that I'm missing. They refer to a census study from 2010 alleging that 1% of Torontonians, Ontarians, Canadians, what was the jurisdiction, Jess? Do you remember?
I think it was a really wide swath around the GTA, but it includes a ton of rural communities.
Right.
Like people aren't riding bikes in King, for example.
Yeah, there you go. Although apparently you should, because it's really fun to ride up there is what I'm told. But anyway, the 1% of people going to work is the number the government likes to promote based upon this cherry pick study. But more recent research, as I've been made aware, says that in the city of Toronto, if you look at the amount of people who regularly commute by bicycle, the number climbs to as high as 70%. 70%. That's a huge figure. And you think about 6 million, as Jess was saying, 6 million bike share uses per year. That is a considerable number of people that we have to protect. We have to protect. That's a lot of moms and dads and kids. Hi, Jennifer Fred from Oshawa. So good to see you. That's a lot of moms and dads and kids and friends that we have to make sure as they're getting around the community, they have a safe way to get around the community. So no evidence yet. And the arguments that we've seen are pretty suspect. So sometimes these days in politics, we don't govern by evidence, we govern by sentiment. and we have to make sure that we're bringing the best arguments from evidence to persuade people that safety matters. I want to take one more look at the comments. And then, Jen, I'd like to throw to you, because what we haven't heard yet is the highways analysis of this bill, talking about the issues pertaining to the Greenbelt, and something you've been holding the government to account on for a long time. But let me just have a quick look to make sure I've captured, because I saw Brian's questions. Mike Ballard, thank you for the offer to say that to help your friends who drive cars, you will offer to stay in your lane. That's very kind of you. Arto writes, a policy and legislative response to frustration is not sensible. Most of the frustration in this case is based on false and misleading info. I would agree. Linda Bissinger writes, why is it that world cities like Amsterdam and Copenhagen can manage cycle riding? Very good point. Before throwing to Jen, what I will say is we have seen already achieved in the world Vision Zero, if people are familiar with what that is, like moving towards the goal of zero deaths in a community. So Copenhagen and Denmark, and I believe it is Finland and Helsinki have both had years where there have been zero deaths of vulnerable road users, like pedestrians, seniors, persons with disabilities, cyclists, whatever the case may be. So it's happened. It's achievable. It's not pie in the sky, but the key thing, as I understand it, is they made sure the infrastructure was built to keep people safe. Florence is saying Oslo too. There we go. So this is, and let's remember, Oslo, Helsinki, these are cities that resemble Canadian cities. They get very cold, very snowy in the winter, just like Canadian cities. So it can be done. It is not the case that it's impossible, that the cynical perspectives would have us believe that. It is possible to design safe streets for all in the summer, in the spring, in the winter, in the fall. We can do it. Jennifer French, my beloved friend from Oshawa, who is leading us at committee on Bill 212. Jen, we've been talking a lot about the bill's impacts for vulnerable road users, for active transportation lanes, but as our critic for infrastructure, you've got an even wider lens on this bill, particularly the impacts on the proposed 413. Do you want to help us understand Bill 212 from your perspective? And thanks a million for joining us.
Well, yes, I'm happy to do that. I really apologize for showing up late. If I'm being totally honest, I slept in. So not because this isn't totally important, but because this government has been running me in circles with road safety, except it has not been about road safety, right? It's about running over democracy. So before I launch into 212, it's just been a heck of a week. Bill 197, which ostensibly is about, safer roads, has rushed through the committee process. So yesterday was the clause by clause where we went through and did our best to, have that last opportunity to get voices on the record. For folks who aren't necessarily remembering that one, because there's so many things on fire right now. A lot of that was about the e-bike classifications to come. Lots of questions around that. So we had tried to move amendments, Joel, to get your Bill 40, my Bill 15 included. The government, of course, talks about safety as paramount and there's no hierarchy of road users and all of that. But certainly no opportunity for anything restorative, certainly no opportunity to hear from real people and families. So it was again defeating and a bit demoralizing, but appreciated the thoughtful comments that had been sent in on that. So I've been in that lane. I'm certainly interested in hearing from people today because, as Joel said, we're heading back into the legislature this week into committee on 212. I had done a 1 hour lead and I did a lot of focusing on the 413, getting the voices on the record, thoughtful comments from the engineers who are continuing to be against bad planning and bad infrastructure. The environmental perspective, the government is again with this bill running roughshod, further diminishing the process. So I did an hour kind of focused on those things, knowing that Joel and my colleagues were going to give them more in depth with the bike lane conversation. So I had raised that. I also talked about the transportation enforcement officers and what isn't in this bill that is needed to keep anyone connected to, provincial highways safer. But I think about the bike lanes as I, drive in my car to Queen's Park, and I'm not going to add anything more thoughtful than what others would add. But I'll say, if this government thinks that by erasing bike lanes that they are erasing, those who would cycle and those who would use them, they're wildly mistaken. I know that we're still going to be sharing roads, and now people will be hurt, will be injured, will be killed. And that is something that I don't understand what the government doesn't understand. Like, they're just pandering to some unhappy folks. So I am really impressed, of course, with all of the testimony that folks have been sending in, the voices that you've been sharing. So I'm glad to be a part of that. I don't know that I've got my briefing notes. I've got my this is my pile of 212 from my 1 hour lead. Y'all don't need that from me. If you really want to listen to the 1 hour speech, it is on my YouTube. But I'm happy to try and answer questions. I'm still in 197. I have a speech on that on Monday. So anyway.
Fair. Thank you, Jen. Thank you so much. Florence, I don't mean to pick on you, Florence, but you are one of our big vulnerable road user leaders here in Ottawa from Bike Ottawa. Is there any chance you wanted to jump in at this moment and give the folks a sense of how Bill 212 is impacting our city and road safety? I think if you'd like, you can just unmute, but if not, you can just message and we can move along. Don't worry.
No, somebody unmuted me. I didn't know.
On peut parler français ici quand même. Donc, allons-y dans votre langue préférée. C'est à vous.
Non, c'est bon, c'est lundi que je parlerai français si jamais on me pousse un peu trop. No, I'm still prepping for Monday, to be honest, and what is the best way to go about it. I'm working on my speaking notes. I think I want to tell a story rather than stats. Because we do have people on our board who bike with kids, who bike. One of our board members does a bike bus, and you know, like I was reflecting on what a bike bus means, and if there was safe infrastructure, you wouldn't need bike buses. You'd be able to have kids bike to school by themselves, for example, right? So, I mean, at the end of the day, one of my worries, I mean, I'm going on a tangent. I'm pretty sure this is not what you were expecting from me, but one of the my worries, to be honest, because I'm very big on social or public discourse, as you'd have it, and the impact of this bill and hammering day in and out that bikes are a problem, that people who bike are a hindrance to people who drive. I've been the subject of road rage. I've been called a fucking retard by somebody in a F-150 with a friend biking side by side in a residential street, so off Main Street, Joel. So you're like trying to reach the map behind Main Street. And we were biking side by side and slowly, because 30 kph, so why not, right? Like, it's not a through road. And we were called fucking retards for slowing, you know, young white male in an F-150 who would press his gas pedal to intimidate us from behind, and who called us fucking retards after that. And one thing I'm worried about, to be honest, particularly as a woman, it is the impact on women and cycling, because I do have my limits. I bike year round. I bike on streets that don't necessarily have safe infrastructure. But I will have a limit, and if I fear for my safety, I have not reached the point of not cycling anymore. But it's, I mean, we're all talking the same language here. We're all talking about safety, but for me, one big thing is empowering, or how do you say, emboldening, right? Is that the English word?
That's perfect English.
Emboldening drivers to be more aggressive, to be and more aggressive, and put people's lives at risk. Like, I'm not talking about just words. I'm talking about intimidating, being bullies on the road. I'm talking about making people scared so they get off the road with their bikes. And the more people, this bill to me is emboldening people, like drivers in particular, and male drivers, I will point a little more, to be demonize threats towards people on bikes. I have yet to have had issues with women driving. Usually it's men. But anyway, I'm going on in all sorts of directions. But to me, this is like beyond safe infrastructure, beyond like safety due to safe infrastructure. Is like trying to scare people who bike off the road. Like, you literally want them to disappear. Like, it's basically going to lead some people to that as well. right? I think I'll stop it at that. Like, I don't know if you have more, but
No, that's brilliant. I mean, I totally understand what you're saying, and it must have been so frustrating in that moment, to have someone attempting to insult you or intimidate you. I mean, it is very different experiencing the street, um, self-powered on some kind of a device between, sitting in a couple of tons of plastic and steel. It's very different. I mean, and we can acknowledge that reckless driving happens in all kinds of different vehicles. Um, and what I love about the Vision Zero vision is that it makes the assumption that people are going to do stupid stuff when they're driving vehicles in the road. There are always going to be, sadly, regardless of the amount of congestion there is, there are going to be people that make really bad decisions. I was once a teenager. I've made my fair share of those too. And we can design our cities for human error. We can design our cities for human aggressiveness. But I'm really thankful, Florence, that you extended the discussion beyond infrastructure to just talking about road rage, because it is a real thing. We are certainly seeing it, and the gendered aspect of that. I certainly hear and see a lot of that from friends of mine who are women or gender diverse people getting around the city. Absolutely, I hear you. I hear you.
I have wondered, to be honest. I've had instances, whether as a pedestrians or on my bike, where like, you react, you make gestures, or you do things out of fear, right? Like you react to what you perceive as threats. And I have wondered on a couple of occasions if the guys, because it was guys every time, if they were going to get off their car to beat me up. They would stop in the middle of the intersection. I'm like, is that person going to just get out and beat me up? And I wouldn't stand a chance. I'll shut up now, Joel, I promise.
Ben, no, continue. Like this, we need the passion. The passion is important, Florence. Thank you. And this is exactly what a lot of people feel. Before I throw to the next person, I feel compelled. Jen, did you have your hand up? Go, you go. I'll share the story that I was thinking of in a minute. You go.
Florence, if you are coming, did I understand that you will be presenting at committee?
Yes. Yeah.
It's a tough thing if you haven't presented to a committee to walk into that room and know what is the right thing to say. I see Jess on screen. I know Jess has been an important voice at multiple committees, but in that room, you're faced with government members and opposition members who will listen to the personal stuff and nod and understand on a personal level. And there are people behind you who work for the government in the ministry who might keep track of stats or make notes or things. So there are multiple audiences in that space. And normally I would say that, balancing that personal with also if you have sort of specific experience that you think is important to know. I would say though that go with your instinct, because in this case, and not to be negative, but we are dealing with a government who has put this piece of legislation forward with the full intent of moving it forward, right? So we can protest and we can get thoughtful comments on the record, and that matters, absolutely. But what I think that they need to hear and be reminded of is that people who would use the bike lanes are not going to stop needing the bike lanes. They're still going to be on the roads. That I think their goal is to cater to the people who are like, get the bikes out of here. And they're like, okay, this will get the bikes out of here, right? To your point about the road rage or the F-150s or kind of some of the folks that they play golf with and listen to. Sorry, I shouldn't be so rude. But anyway, they're folks. And I think that the reality that it's not going to be safer for anyone, that there will not be more space for the cars by removing the infrastructure, because cyclists will still be there, perhaps some fewer because of the intimidation and the danger, as I'm seeing the chat. But I do think that they can add more, they can maybe pull a lane back for cars, and more people are going to be in those cars. There will be more cars. There will be more traffic because we're not allowing, more people to be, part of the solution of reducing that traffic, right? Like the concept I'm seeing in the chat, like, do we want to discourage active transit? Yeah, I think they do. because it's not something that they understand. That F-150 guy, if he has a bike, I imagine it's a moped or so, not to generalize, but I would say go with your instinct, but understand that there you're making a case that has value, and you do have expertise because you're on the roads. And I think whatever you think, like what the government's seeking to accomplish, they're not going to accomplish. And I think that people who are using the roads, like bicycles or wheelchairs, or those who are in the bike lanes, are in a far better position to tell the government what is actually going to result than their staffers or the people who are. Anyway, I'm going long, but don't try and have the right thing, have your thing, right? Like bring your experience, because if I'm giving the government members any credit, most of them are feeling humans, right? Like that they know that they're on the wrong side of this because they don't want people to be hurt, and yet they're going to vote against public safety. So I would put that to them. I'd remind them of that.
Thank you for this positive feedback. One thing about stats as well, to be honest, like they don't believe in stats, right? Like, and like, to what extent do you want to give them stats? Because they don't want to hear them. They don't want to hear the right stats. They're just queuing whatever they have for their own purpose, right?
What I would say, Florence, oh, sorry, go ahead, Jen.
No, I would also say, I think, was it your letter that you had written, like a whole series of, I think Joel had shared it maybe, but it was you had a number of really thoughtful points. And one of them was also highlighting the political relationships between some of the business owners who would be very vocal on this, who have donated to the government, where they've hosted their events. That's who they're listening to. So Florence, you're right. There's not going to be a magic number that they're like, oh, I haven't heard that before. Let's change course. But there's always value in getting the truth and thoughtful information on the public record, because unfortunately, when harm happens, it will be, it will be because they ignored good advice and thoughtful comment.
That was exactly what I was going to say, Jen. Well done. I'm going to run through a few comments here in Q&A. Florence, if do you feel like your questions have been answered?
Yes, sorry, I had muted myself.
No, that's fine. And thank you again so much for all you do for the city, for active transportation, Florence, here in Ottawa, and for joining us today. So I want to read out a few comments here and respond to a few questions from the Q&A forum. Tom Trottier writes, I bike year-round at age 78 in Ottawa. Tom, wow, respect. Some paths lanes are cleared. Some are used as snow dumps by snow plows. The roads are soon cleared and cyclists are forced to take the lane. That's an interesting point. It's true. Sometimes just the way in which snow is cleared forces vulnerable road users into the same space as motorists. It's true. Ian Sherwood. Hi, Ian. Ian writes, Premier Ford has mentioned that bike lanes belong on secondary streets. Is there a definition of a secondary street in the bill? The claim to me makes no sense, as secondary streets are not direct routes and are mostly residential streets where the speed limit is lower than 50 kilometers an hour. So bike lanes are not as necessary on busy primary streets where the speed limit for vehicles is sometimes higher. Your thoughts? No, I think you're making a good point there, Ian, and I see you riding around the city all the time. And certainly, if we want to encourage people to take active transportation, sending them on a milk run all over the neighborhood to get from point A to point B is unlikely to do it. It's just unlikely to do it. I would say the same argument for active transportation, promoting active transportation, whether you're using a scooter or an e-bike or a bike or a power chair, if you're a person with a disability or something like that. We want to be encouraging people to use active transportation by making it as efficient as possible. And that takes people out of cars. So it's actually good for motorists. So making people take a long milk run around the neighborhood is certainly not going to do that. Certainly not going to do that. So I have yet to see a definition of a secondary street or, non-arterial roads, whatever the language that the government likes to use. I have yet to see that. And they certainly wouldn't apply that analysis to cars. So it doesn't make a lot of sense. Tom also wrote here, Paris and many German cities also have bike paths going everywhere. I certainly haven't been in Paris last summer, can attest to that. What I understood is that the mayor of Paris, Mayor Hidalgo, set a goal of having more active transportation users in the downtown of Paris. This was a goal synonymous with the Olympics for people getting around to watch the events. The goal for Mayor Hidalgo was to have more people using active transportation than cars, whether that be taxis, Ubers, or personal vehicles. And that was achieved during the Olympics. So it was good for people to get around the city to be watching and supporting the events. And it's made a significant impact on the city. Although I saw a lot of people on scooters riding 2 on a scooter and they freaked the heck out of me. That's a whole other story. Jen Gautreau writes, since bike share rides are so numerous in Toronto, presumably that means there is a financial loss component for bike share companies if bike lanes are torn out. Are bike share companies involved in protesting this bill? Since money is in Doug Ford's language, I would assume the corporate component would carry some weight. Very good point, Jen. I'm gonna throw to Jeff Speaker in a sec, but I have seen, so people on the deputants list who will be speaking on Monday to the committee where Jen and I are serving, who are coming from a business perspective, particularly the Bloor West Business Improvement Association. They have said very loudly they like these active transportation lanes. They're good for business, and I've heard that too in Ottawa. So that's absolutely the case. We don't have a bike share here in Ottawa, and I don't see bike share on the list of deputants, but certainly a lot of us are using data from bike share usage. Jess, did I miss anything there? Anything worth talking about from a small or employer perspective on Bill 212?
To the best of my knowledge, bike share, I haven't seen anything from them. However, I'll say that system is not run at a profit. So there's not exactly profit at stake if fewer people are riding bikes, although it would just become a bigger money loser if it reduces. We know that we have data from the Bloor Annex BIA that bikes are tremendously beneficial to businesses. For some reason, the Kingsway BIA doesn't understand and is fighting the Bloor West Complete Street Extension, which is a shame. And another whole aspect that I'm not sure we've touched on is housing intensification. We have so much housing being built with bike parking spots that are like 5 times as many as car parking spots. Like the majority of units in pre-con construction projects do not come with a parking spot for a car. And that is at provincial direction. So it's like the left hand is slapping the right hand. They're directly contradicting each other. If we're building housing without cars, then we have to provide safe passage on streets that isn't for cars. This whole thing is so nonsensical, it's hard to articulate.
No, for sure. Diane McIntyre, I see you in the Q&A wanting to speak. I love hearing you speak, Diane. Do you want to hold forth talking about seniors using active transportation? Over to you.
Mute. Okay, there I go.
There you go.
There I go. I wanted to talk about 2 things actually, Joel. First of all, I am a senior. I'm 76 years old. I have not owned a car in this city for the past 50 years. I ride a bike, I walk, and I use public transit when it comes, which is in Ottawa is a huge issue, folks. So I wanted to talk about that. But as a senior, I mean, I've been cut off at corners. I mean, I'm a gray-haired lady on a bike. Second thing I wanted to mention was I hope that all legislation will distinguish between e-bikes, which are, as you know, pedal assisted. The E part only works if you turn it on. I never turn mine on unless I'm going up a hill. I need it on a hill because I've got replaced knees, but I don't need it in the flat. And so I ride a bike as if it's just a normal heavy bike, even though the store said you should always put it on some power to compensate for the weight of the bike. Anyway, e-bikes are not motorbikes, and we must distinguish between the two. They're not one and the same. The second thing I want to mention is I've just returned from a trip to Paris, Barcelona, and Sardinia. And in
Wow.
Paris and Barcelona, the streets are designed for bicycles and active transportation. Along every street, you see a whole lot of bike share options. And in Paris, I was on the Rue des Écoles, which is close to the Sorbonne. And because people have walk-up apartments in Paris, they don't keep their bikes at home. They get a monthly pass for these shared bikes. And the rack outside my hotel had a place for 50 bikes. And people would just come up, park their bike, walk off to the Sorbonne or wherever they were going, and other people would come and pick them up. And the streets were filled with bicycles. The bicycles, buses, and taxis shared a lane. And in Barcelona, the road design was very similar. Buses, bikes, and taxis shared an inside lane. Then there was a huge boulevard for pedestrians, and then there were cars squeezed into a couple of lanes. So I really think that our designers are designing for the almighty automobile and not for us. I live, you know where I live. I live very close to your office and next door to a cooperative housing residence where a lot of the people in it have wheelchairs. And they need safe ways to get across streets and safe passage on smooth pathways. And the sidewalks in the city of Ottawa are not always smooth pathways. So many of them widen a bike lane. I think we need a hell of a lot more bike lanes and not less. So Doug Ford has to get back in his own damn lane and, and travel out to Muskoka in his airplane or whatever he does, where he's built a new emergency hospital near his cottage and eliminated a whole lot of other facilities elsewhere. So I really think that we need people who are thinking about design and not designing for cars. So everything from the 413 to the tunnel under the 401 to the destruction of Ontario Place, the closing of the Science Centre. I mean, none of it is logical and none of it makes any sense. So I really think that we need some thoughtful design. So I'm very glad that you're my representative there. I'm looking forward to you to being my representative on Parliament Hill, and we'll continue the battle. Somebody said to me last night, I was at a peace meeting, War, Peace, and Propaganda, and somebody said to me, what do you think of the leader of the NDP? And I said, well, it doesn't matter. I'm going to be voting for Joel Harden as an NDP in Ottawa Centre. And the person said to me, wish he was leader of the NDP. And I thought, yeah, Jack would be pleased. Anyway, thanks, Joel, for everything you're doing. Thanks, Jen, for whatever you're doing. I wish I could be in Toronto. I'm assuming that's where the meeting is on Monday, but it's not possible on a bicycle. And I don't have time because I've got a choir practice because we're raising money for the food bank on December 7th. Anyway, thank you for letting me speak.
Thank you for all you do, Diane. Thank you for your kind words and thank you for all you do. Okay, I'm going to go through some more of these Q&A comments here. I see Claire Benton has a comment. If it's all right, Claire, I'll just read it out. Claire writes, I'm offering myself as an example of a cyclist who does not want gridlock, but is also worried about my safety. I don't own a car by choice, rather like Diane. I bike or take transit or walk. I do most of my commuting and some of my errands by transit. Gridlock affects buses as well as cars, and it affects the length of my commute and how long errands take me. I would do more by bike because most of my errands are within a few kilometers of my home. However, the presence of bike lanes or multi-use pathways is a huge factor in whether I travel by bike. There are places I won't bike to because I'm worried about my safety on the streets to get there. For example, I avoid the intersection of Gladstone and Rochester now. Whew. It's a smart choice, Claire. we've had some tragedies there. I met a family, the Grindell family, that lost their son JP at that intersection when he was sadly run over by a dump truck 20 years ago. And we had a critical incident last summer, as Councillor Ariel Troster has spoken about a lot at City Hall. That is a dangerous intersection. You're wise to avoid it. I think the city staff, however, have said very clearly to Councillor Troster and to me, there's a way to design that infrastructure better. They just need the funds to do it. It's a matter of money. It's a matter of money. Do we have the funds available to make that intersection safer? So I take your point, and that's on us. That's on Jen and me and all other members of provincial parliament to make sure we get the money for our communities to make sure they're safe. So hopefully we can do more of that. And my understanding from Councillor Troster is there is a priority for that particular infrastructure for that intersection to be done within the next year. So fingers crossed that will happen. Lucy writes, I completely agree that it is more than infrastructure. That is more than about infrastructure. Pardon me, Lucy. There is a whole damaging rhetoric towards cyclists. I've been yelled at, called racial slurs, and been given death threats while out cycling. My goodness, Lucy. Wow. Did you want to unmic and talk a little bit more about that? Lucy, no pressure. I'll just pause for a minute in case you do.
Sure. Yes. So I like to think that I try and follow the rules as much as possible when out cycling. But I understand that it's technically not legal to ride on the sidewalks. But out of fear for my own safety, I will do that sometimes. And I have a lot of very angry people yell at me. Sometimes it's a pedestrian, sometimes it's people in cars. And I totally understand why pedestrians would not be happy to have cyclists on the sidewalk, but out of a lack of any other option, I feel like I'm forced to do so just out of fear of my own safety. And I really think that bike lanes are a great way to solve the issue and give cyclists a lane of their own so that, we're not risking our lives by being in traffic with cars, and we're not risking pedestrians' health and safety by being on the sidewalks. And there's so much research out there that highlights the benefits of having bike lanes, that it reduces congestion, it saves lives. But I don't know if the facts and the figures and the statistics are really all that meaningful in changing people's minds. I feel like there has to be a different narrative to combat. I feel like it's a culture divide, and I don't know what the solution is. And I'm really glad that there's a community of you folks and Joel Harden that's helping to push the issue. But yeah, I think that there has to be another factor other than just facts and figures and statistics. And I find maybe with the rising cost of living and rising cost of car ownership, that I think maybe some people might move away from owning a car. And that might be like that I think may be more persuasive than all the other facts and figures and statistics that we've been giving. So yeah,
bikes are affordable. Scooters are affordable. Other devices are affordable. Lucy, before you go, do you mind if I ask you what parts of the city? You're in Ottawa?
Yes.
What parts of the city do you feel it's absolutely too dangerous to be on the road with cars and it's better to be on the sidewalk? Because I have lived this, I have heard this before, and it's important for us for the record because we're going to be giving advice to friends of ours in the city as well as the province. What are the parts of the city where you feel particularly at risk if you were to stay on the road?
Rideau Street for sure.
I hear you there.
I don't bike down Rideau Street anymore. And with all the new condo construction that's popping up on like Rideau and King Edward along there, I avoid that area completely. And I I don't get out that often, to be completely honest. But I find that the new bike lanes on Montreal Road, I use those very frequently. The Rideau River multi-use pathway, I use that very frequently as well. And along Beechwood, there's a little bit of a bike lane. I think that could definitely be extended, and maybe have a concrete barrier set up instead. But yeah, I no longer take Rideau Street now.
Fair enough. Lucy, thank you for being with us and being so real in this moment and being so direct. We really appreciate it. And it's going to be part of the record for our conversation. So thank you very much.
Thank you.
I want to go to Ethan tells me, hold on. Mike Darman, you've had your hand up and I'm sorry to make you wait. Mike, over to you.
Hi. Thanks so much for letting me on. It's Mike Darman from Guelph Coalition for Active Transportation in Guelph.
Right on.
And we just actually had our first ghost bike ride, which was a horrible thing to have to do, but I hope it's the last one we ever have to do. And it was for a woman who was killed on a 4-lane road right in front of a school with no bike lanes.
Oh my goodness.
So yeah, we had 150 people show up for that, and we have to really thank our friends at Cycle Toronto for helping us organize that too, and tell us the proper way to do it. But my point was, what the question I want to ask is, I was recently talking to our mayor in Guelph, and he sent an email to city staff asking for the impacts of what Bill 212 will have on our existing bike lanes that have been put in that have taken a lane of traffic away. And so they sent back a list, and obviously there's going to be a huge cost to municipalities all over Ontario to remove these bike lanes, possibly. And we know in Toronto it's going to we've seen the figures just for that alone. I'm just wondering if someone, or if all municipalities could somehow send in the cost to the Premier and say, this is going to be the total cost province-wide of removing all of these bike lanes, and actually, how can we spend that money better instead of just wasting it on, all this planning that's been done and all these bike lanes that we put in, now we're going to rip them out. Anyway, that's my question basically to you.
Really good point, Mike. Jess, what is the number from the city of Toronto? Is it 48 million that it's going to cost, or is it even more?
48 million, but it could, if the province yields and reimburses the city for the cost of installing them, it would be in the 70 millions.
Wow.
Yeah.
So this is a massive number, and I've heard some people online talking about it, Mike, as the Ford tax. I mean, this is like an additional tax, and this is a premier who always talks about wanting to reduce taxes and make life more affordable. But municipalities are now in the situation where, for active transportation infrastructure they've designed, they have ready to roll the first moment crews are available, they're being told they may not be able to do it. And again, just to mention it, Mike, it would apply to Guelph, I'm sure. There is a rumor that we may get an amendment. It could even be an amendment we see in the middle of next week while Jen and me and others are at committee to retroactively apply Bill 212. So that could be for bike lanes that are already built, like the 48 million that comes from the Toronto experience. That's the direction we could be going. So this all adds up to funds that will be wasted. And I certainly think if you're a conservative voter and you care about the fiscal prudence of the province, that's got to be a red flag for you. It doesn't make a whole lot of sense. I totally take your point. Anything else, Mike? And thank you for joining us from Guelph.
No, that's great, Joel. I just did throw something in the chat on people dumping leaves and snow in bike lanes because it was previously brought up. And in the city of Guelph, we have a bylaw that actually prevents that from, or supposedly makes it illegal to do that. But of course, hardly anybody knows that, and everybody dumps snow and leaves in the bike lane. And of course, it's up to people to complain to bylaw, so it's not really enforced. Anyway, that's my last point.
Local vigilance, very important, Mike. I take your point. I have Adam K up next. Over to you, Adam.
Thank you. I'm so glad you're putting this together because I registered to speak, and I guess because there's so few people who can speak, it wasn't possible. I was ready to go visit my mom in Brampton and speak there because it's an important issue. I wasn't expecting to be telling this story, but I heard Florence speaking earlier about how people could feel emboldened to carry out their road rage against cyclists, the more they're told that they're the majority and cyclists are this fringe group that are, this insurgency on the road or something. And I want to speak to that because it reminded me of something I'd forgotten, the experience I had with road rage. And I'm sure I've had more, but actually they're starting to come back to me. But there was one in particular that speaks to this on Richmond in Ottawa. So I live in Ottawa. I've cycled there all the time I've lived here since 2013. I moved from Mississauga, and I remember biking in the summer down Richmond once, and that's kind of not an area I would expect cars to get through very quickly. It's a lot of stop and go. There's festivals held there, a lot of businesses. And so I remember biking. By that point, they had painted the sharrows onto the road, and I just remember somebody honking behind me, and I didn't really have anywhere to go. But I'm just like, I'm trying to wave, like, just a sec, like I'll get off the road soon. And I came up to Fairmont, and the guy, and you can guess, Florence, it was a young male, if she's on the phone still. He drove. He. I'm starting to remember. Again, memory. It's so outlandish that maybe I'm coloring this, but what I remember is him driving up onto the sidewalk on my right, and then passing me that way, so that two wheels were on the sidewalk and two wheels were on the road, and just like like driving past me into a red light, and it was like a T intersection. So just to make the point that I guess I don't belong there. And then I caught up to him on the next intersection because you don't really go that fast on this road. And then he yelled across this poor woman sitting in the passenger seat at me with his window up. So I couldn't even hear what he was yelling, but I just sort of, I didn't know what to make of that. It was just, this is the kind of road rage that I think could become more popular if we're told more and more that cyclists don't belong on roads, push them to the side roads. It sounds dismissive. I don't think it's the real plan either, because there's this sense of like an arterial road, which I'm not sure I fully understand, but what's to say that bikes don't belong on an arterial road? Like, it just seems like there's this sort of common sense, folksy use of these terms that I feel the government is trying to insist or imply that cyclists don't belong on these roads. And then therefore we can remove these bike lanes. And that's probably why they're not listening to these stats or well, I don't want to speculate too far, but that's probably a reason in my mind why they're not feeling like they need to pay attention to them. One other thing that Mike's story brought to mind is this same sense of entitlement is why I think I see people just parking in the bike lane on Laurier sometimes. And, I'll try to politely tell them, like, can you move? You're in the way. And, it doesn't happen as often. It doesn't happen so often, but still the fact that somebody, like, no one would ever park in a car lane like that. I think they would rightly be honked out of there. So I try to do the polite version of that on the bike. But that's two stories of, I think, entitlement that could be emboldened by the kind of common sense thinking that they're pushing.
Hey, thank you for sharing that. That must have been hair raising.
Yeah, I was blown away. I was it was I was like, it was a mixture of anger back, but also just pity for the person sitting in the car with him.
You're the better person to think of it that way. Goodness, wow. Thank you for joining. Oh, sorry, Jen.
Well, you don't need to be sorry. I'm wanting to elbow my way in. Typical damn politician. I appreciate people sharing, and just so you know, I'm taking notes because we will have the opportunity to raise these things as we're discussing them at committee. So it's not about sharing the names, but sharing some of these stories. So really appreciate this opportunity. I want to read a tweet that Ben Spur, folks will be familiar with him as like the longtime transportation reporter for the Toronto Star. But he had tweeted, the provincial legislation will require cities to demonstrate that bike lanes that remove car lanes won't have an adverse impact on vehicle traffic. The point of the parkside bike lanes is to slow car traffic. There have been almost 1,500 crashes there in 10 years and 3 deaths. And that one kind of highlighted for me the point of the bike lanes is to keep people safe. They also, you know, as he says here, the Parkside bike lanes, but you can all think of it better than I can because you're on them more often than I am. I ride my bikes in parks and like I'm nervous on the roads. But to actually have that traffic calming impact to prevent deaths and harm, right? And so the fact that the government is so limited that they're saying, well, you know, bike lanes that have an adverse impact on traffic, they got to go. There is no understanding and no appreciation for the safety side of things, right? So it is something that none of this makes actual sense. So and it's very hard for people who do make sense and who are navigating in this world, trying to, you know, do the right thing and have rational, thoughtful conversations. This is a very frustrating government. Florence had said something earlier. Was it Florence? Might have been Diane, about the e-bikes. I think it was Diane. Having been in committee just like Wednesday and Friday, talking about the classification, appropriate regulations that are going to make that difference between mopeds and sort of the throttle assist and the ones that look like motorcycles versus the bicycle style. Like there was lots of conversation, but we have no idea where the government is going with it. It was not heartening. I mean, they don't seem to understand, and I think there are people trying to do that work. But where we end up, I don't know. And there was someone, I don't know if Jamie Stuckless is on this call or folks know Jamie, but she was a bright and strong voice at committee, and she had I don't have it here with me, but she had pictures of the bikes that, you know, are going to be illegal, that allow passengers, you know, and child seats and whatnot. And so things like that, there isn't a lot of common sense. So this is a moment in time where they're going to be the amendment we haven't seen. Joel, did you already get into the weeds on that? That we don't know what the government amendment is actually going to say that gives them
mentioned it, yeah.
Yeah, because it's not in the bill, right? Like they
No.
brought this bill forward. The premier was, you know, was talking about taking out, you know, ripping out the bike lanes, whereas the Minister of Transportation says, oh, we're going to do consultations. And Premier's like, no, we're not. We already know which ones we're doing, kind of thing. So this is a Premier initiative, I think, that he's got friends who've told him, get that out of, you know, get that bike lane out of here. And so he's going to come hell or high water, but it wasn't even in the bill. Like the power to remove existing bike lane infrastructure is in the bill. So the government's amending their own legislation. That is how quickly this has been evolving for them.
Mm-hmm. And they're in hurry up mode for sure. They're in
hurry up mode, which means they're going to get it wrong. But the pushback from municipalities is key. To the gentleman from Guelph, I think that as we're talking to our municipal leaders and actually asking them, what is this going to look like for us? What is this going to look like for you as a council? And if you're unhappy about it, make sure to put this at the feet of the premier. Like we do need that political pressure is what the premier tends to feel.
Absolutely.
Yeah, from different levels of government is important. And I just want to say, Jess, your thoughts on the housing intensification. I feel quite stupid that I hadn't actually done the math on that. That's government language. And Lucy, you talked about the rising cost of car ownership. More will go away from that. Like that is an affordability piece. And again, that is something that's a language right now of all legislators, because that's all we hear in our communities is life is getting harder. So I mean, everyone's voice has I've appreciated and I've been taking notes, but those two were like, oh yeah, wait a second. They can't argue back on that one.
No.
So thank you.
I totally agree. Now, Dave Shellnut, you've been waiting for a long time, I believe. Before I throw to you, I just want to mention to Linda in the chat, at one point, as I'm reading it here, you mentioned that you've also seen aggressive cyclists, which give a bad name to road safety. Hey, that's absolutely legit. Like, we do not want anyone driving unsafely. It's true. And protected infrastructure is one way we keep each other safe. But, you know, we're against all form of reckless driving, Linda. So that's not devil's advocate. That's legit. That's true. We agree with you. Dave Shellnut, if you are here, I understand you to be here. You've done so much to defend people who've been hurt in the street as a cause of road violence. Over to you. Ethan or Ty, Dave may be having issues unmuting if you want to help there.
I can't unmute people. I think only Ethan can.
Oh, and I'm here. Ethan's telling me it's a different Dave. Sorry, Dave. I've misidentified you. It's not Dave Shellnut, a different Dave, the bike guy. Glad, Dave, you're here all the same. Are you having some issues unmuting though? If you are, maybe you can just tell us in the chat and I can come back to you. Yeah, technology. Oh no, there you go.
Hi, Joel. Sorry, I walked away from the phone for a sec after you thought you were talking to Dave, the bike lawyer. I really happy to be on this call. I registered late. I completely forgot. I'm actually out of town. So thanks to whoever sent me the link in your Twitter account. So just a quick 20 seconds about who I am, what do I do, and why am I here. So I've lived in Ottawa and the east end of Ottawa mostly for a good part of my life. And having lived in Germany for 6 years, I certainly had a great sense of point of view on German engineering. And in 1991, I became involved with now known as Bike Ottawa, Citizens for Safe Cycling, was my early days in with that organization. And also did a bit of work with Frank Jeong with his group, Auto Free Ottawa, which was a bit more radical style of lobbying. And as you may recall, in 1994, we got together on Bank Street by Lansdowne on the Bank Street Bridge and painted a bike lane because the new bridge didn't have a lane. And of course, Sean Menard finished that work, thanks to him. But just a note on that. I mean, that took 30 years to get resolved, if you will. That bridge should have been designed completely different to to accommodate active transportation users, considering the importance of its connection. So just a bit more on me. In 2016, I moved closer to town in Blackburn Hamlet, and my kids biked to school about 3 kilometers away. Coming home with some horror stories about some close calls. So I ramped up my advocacy at that point. Unfortunately, in 2019, in summer of 2019, we had 2 deaths in the East End. Simon Curry, I believe was 13 years old at that point, got hit trying to cross at the Jean d'Arc overpass. 2 weeks later, Idan Azrad, 27-year-old man trying to bike from South Orleans on Renault, which is not really a bike-friendly road, got hit from behind at about 11 o'clock in the morning. No reason for that collision to have occurred. Anyways, I got a call from Aaron Cunningham at that point, asking to put together a ghost bike for that. That was probably the hardest thing I've ever done in my lobby world, if you will. Fast forward to end of September, and I get another call saying that an Indigenous woman in Vanier was a victim of some sort of road violence, and she succumbed to her injuries. 33-year-old Chanel Charette. So we've installed a couple of ghost bikes recently at the City Hall because it was another death on Old Richmond Road. So it was a rather large event at that point. So I also run, a bike page that's got about 2,300 people focused on East End issues. I've communicated with you on a couple of occasions on that. And really, I guess one of my questions / comments about everything that's going on in this realm is that engagement is extremely hard. It's like pulling teeth until it happens to you. And even the example of earlier, they were talking about there's some BIA that's on board, but BIAs typically feed to the auto, to cars. I instead of calling BIAs business improvement areas, I call them now because it's auto. So really, ultimately, one of my questions, I guess, with everything that I've trying to get done. I mean, we had meetings for 4 years with, for 2 years with all 4 East End councillors, which are all catering to car use, and it basically resulted to about nothing. So, and in those meetings, I had about 5 or 6 people show up in a population base of about 120,000. So, I guess ultimately, what can we do to increase engagement? It's sad to see, but the numbers are really low when it comes to addressing, anything to do with active transportation infrastructure, especially when it becomes a serious and a matter of life and death. I watched comments on one particular community page in East End when Simon was killed, and it was just a 2 days of all kinds of comments and then nothing, right? So it's hard. It's after so much work and involvement, it gets draining to see so little involvement. So if there's any kinds of tips and suggestions on how we can do that, and I mean ultimately with everything, with all kinds of different groups that exist, and we had a coalition at one point here in Ottawa, but I really feel strongly that we should be forming coalitions to get more numbers of people concerned with similar in the similar vein of active transportation infrastructure, and not necessarily just look at bike infrastructure. We've talked about earlier how people, all kinds of different people use bike lanes, quote unquote. So, yeah. Anyways, I'll leave it at that for now.
Well, thanks, Dave. And look, thank you for all your work in getting that Bank Street Bridge safe. That you're right. That is a major achievement. And I also see in the Q&A someone commenting. Hold on. Yeah, Judith commenting from the point of view of a pedestrian, saying that she's very thankful that lane exists, and she's nervous when cyclists jump up on the sidewalk. Yeah, for sure. I can totally get that. You're right near a low rail, which goes straight into the canal, for sure. So that's credit, Dave, to your work. And I agree, Councillor Menard deserves a lot of credit with getting that finally green lighted, but thank you. Insofar as, where do we plug in? I would tell you this is perhaps the silver lining of this moment, at least for me. I have seen advocates mobilize so fast on this, and it's been gratifying to see big numbers. We've had at least 600 or 700 people appear with about less than 48 hours notice at Queen's Park to do a critical mass ride around the legislature to spots where people had lost their lives. And that has happened in our city. And that's drawn media attention. That's shaped the narrative. And I think that's why this government's in a rush. But I think it's important that we all remember that governments can pass laws, but communities grant permission, right? So if this government believes it can ram through legislation and then try to shoehorn municipalities to do things which are deeply unpopular, generally speaking, governments who try those sorts of tactics don't fare well. That's been my experience. So this is one moment in the broader pursuit of road safety, I would say, where a government is, unfortunately, they have their fingers in their ears and they're moving forward as if they feel they know it's correct based upon sentiment, not based upon evidence. But we will bring that evidence forward and bring those stories forward. And Dave, you've been a big part of that in Ottawa, and we appreciate that. I want to go down the list here because, hold on, Tom, you've been waiting to get in for a while, if I remember correctly. In one point in the Q&A, you mentioned you'd had your hand up. Did you want to jump in here? Go ahead, Tom.
Okay, now I've unmuted. Yeah, I've been cycling for, I don't know, 70 years or so. Um, and I've converted my bike to an e-bike, so it makes it a little easier. Uh, and I bike all year round, and I have good, strong bones. So even though I fall now and then, I don't break anything. Also, I have padding. I have padding. So I think that I'm pretty fearless myself. I will go down Carlig Avenue, which is a
Ooh,
4 to 6
that
lane road in the middle of the right lane.
you're
But
braver than me, Tom. That is a dangerous street.
but I wear big yellow construction jacket or a safety vest, and I have a flashing red light on the back of my helmet and a flashing white light on top of my helmet. So I really try to stand out. If they're going to hit me, they got to aim for me. So and once in a while I get yells when I go down Carling, but I think it's a lot healthier to be biking than it is to be uh, uh, going in a car and sitting on a sofa. And I recall the one picture that was the entrance to a gym, and they had an escalator up to the entrance of the gym, a little 10-foot escalator. Uh, uh, you'd want to, if you're going to exercise, you should be doing it while you're living the rest of your life. And I try to exercise. I mean, I live in a 6-story apartment building now, and I live on the 6th floor, and I always take the stairs because I want to be working. I want my life to be continuing as not as a paraplegic, but as someone who can accomplish things, someone who can do things, not just sit around and watch TV. And I think it's important that we all get out on our bikes. And I know it takes a little bit of courage sometimes, but you can certainly you can choose the lesser used roads, the side roads, and so on. I think it's hard in a city like Toronto where you have these valleys and that are interrupting everything, and you're forced onto roads. So that's where we need the bike lanes on the bridges, especially. But then it gets discontinuous. Uh, I mean, Ottawa has the same problem with the overpasses, trying to get over the 416. 416? Yeah, I guess the 416 and the 417. They serve as kind of barriers, and they don't have bike lanes on them. And sometimes the entrance to them, like at Innes Road, is very scary. There's there's where I get off and walk across the road to rather than try to bike through the lanes of cars going 50 miles an hour, trying to get onto the 4 lane highway. Uh, but I really would like a city like Copenhagen or Amsterdam or the myriad or Paris or the myriad cities in Holland and in Germany, which have bike lane networks that go everywhere where it's separated and it's so comfortable trying to go down. I mean, it's nice in Ottawa. We have a variety of paths that we can go down along the canal and along the river and other places, and that's good. But they don't go everywhere, and we need a bike lane network that goes everywhere. And it's ideally there'd be paths like they have, where the separation is not just a line of paint, but where there's a median, where roads are taken over by cyclists and by pedestrians, because cities are made for people, not for cars. And we live in a community, and we shouldn't be kind of separated out in our little suburban home away from everybody else and just driving to events and so on, then driving back and insulated by this cage of steel and plastic. And I think it's important that we all bike and that we try to make sure that everybody can bike.
Yeah, and I hear you. I hear you, and I also think um, what you described of the escalator going into the fitness center. that's a abrogation of the Accessibility for Ontarians with Disabilities Act. That needs to have an accessible entrance up to 2025. And I know my friend, I don't think my friend Sally Thomas, who lives in the same building here where the community office is on Catherine Street, who's a Paralympic champion, one of our Paralympic champions in the city, and uses the bike lanes, the extra transportation lanes regularly to get around in her power scooter. We need to make sure these lanes are open for everybody. I mean, I can't remember who said it, but it was Diane, when Diane was talking about how poorly we sometimes do on snow clearance on sidewalks. There's many situations in which, as you're saying, Tom, like we condemn people to their homes for months of the year when we can't remove snow quick enough. And again, boy, I don't sound like I'm a very loyal servant of the province of Ontario with what I'm about to tell you, but whoever has not gotten to Montreal yet to see that system that they have built in 3 or 4 years, you gotta find a moment in your calendar in the next 6 months, get out to the city of Montreal, any part of the city of Montreal. I was there recently working a by-election in the riding of La Salle et Mar Verdun. And I took the train in, got to the main train station, and I got a Bixie bike, just like Toronto's bike share program, found my way out to Verdun, which is not close. It's quite a long way, but absolutely gorgeous scenic route along the St. Lawrence River. It was spectacular and it was safe. And I saw all kinds of people. I saw kids, I saw elders, I saw people using power chairs, I saw scooter users. There were stoplights for those bike lanes. It's been really well built. There's been a significant amount of investment there. And like I said, Mayor Plante told me personally that snow removal for bike lanes is as important for the vehicular lanes in the city of Montreal. That's the commitment. And that's a pretty significant commitment. So when your city is getting written about in international cycling magazines as a world destination, maybe Barcelona, Paris, Copenhagen is coming to Canada. And maybe we can come to Ottawa, maybe we can come to Toronto, maybe we can come to Peterborough, maybe we can come to Sudbury, Windsor, Oshawa. We can build these sorts of communities here too and reap the benefits. Okay, am I missing anybody here? Does anybody want to unmute and jump in? Go ahead. Michael Wolfson, nice to see your comments in here. I wholeheartedly agree with what you say about Carling. That's been mentioned before. And I find your MacGyvering of your bicycle to create space between yourself and users to be good advice. Would anybody like to jump in here? Maggie, I also hear what you're saying about Maitland Avenue for sure.
I have a quick question or a suggestion.
Go, Jess, go.
Perhaps for an amendment, which occurred to me hearing about the affordability crisis. I, like many of others, I'm sure, save thousands of dollars a year by biking versus driving because it saves gas and it saves maintenance costs. Like, would the province maybe set up a fund for me to send those invoices to as a low income person? Because they like, if I'm incurring thousands of dollars of extra costs every year, why shouldn't they reimburse me for that since it's a direct result of this legislation?
It's a really good idea. I think there's all kinds of creative ways in which we can encourage people to do active transportation, Jess. And if you're incurring those costs, doing right by the planet and reducing congestion on the roads, why not? Right? If corporate executives can deduct tens of thousands of dollars in Maple Leafs and Raptors tickets and fancy meals, and the taxpayer pays 50% of that, I would think it's a lot better investment for people to be, kidding themselves up for what you're talking about. That makes a lot of sense. Okay, I see my friend Allison Stewart, who happens to be the bike mayor of Toronto. Now, I know, Allison, you're running errands, you're doing your things, but you're here in this space, so thank you for being here. But you asked, what are ways that people can still contribute despite not being allowed to depute at the committee where Jen and I and others will be serving? Great question. So first thing is, you can still submit written comments to the clerk. And what I'll just ask Ethan to do from our crew is drop the email in where that will go directly to the clerks of the committee. And I would invite you to please, anything you've said here, we're going to be doing a transcript of this just to help me with my prep, and I'll be sharing it with Jen and Jessica Bell and other folks that are going to committee. Thank you 1,000 times for everything people are sharing, because you're going to help us at Queen's Park next week. But if you want to take some of what you've written and send it directly to the clerk of the Standing Committee for Infrastructure, Culture, and Heritage Policy, please do. It's your house. That committee is there to serve you, not the other way around. So we would encourage written submissions. If you want to follow up with me or with Jen or with others, our contact information is publicly available. If there's anything else you want to share with us, that's a way to engage that process. Maybe I'll also ask, sorry, Ethan, giving you a million things to do. Maybe I'll also ask you to tune in if you'd like. You can tune into the live stream of the legislature to watch committee debate. You can take that in. And I am sure there will be commenting on social media. People will be talking about it on social media. Jen, over to you.
If folks don't have, there's an app. It's called Parlance, Parlance. And it's not just for MPP nerds like myself, but it's an app that allows you to watch whatever's happening at the legislature, either in the main chamber or in any of the side committee rooms, and you can just watch real time. That's if you don't know, when Joel says follow along at committee and you think, what on earth is he talking about? How do I do that? Parlance is one. To Joel's point, make your submissions. I'm going to add to that though. Make the submission. It's then made available to all committee members, but also send it to Joel's office. Like copy him, carbon copy him, because we don't get notifications when things go in there. And because the government is making this so super duper fast, if he already has a copy of it, then he can raise it at committee and say, as members know, we have this, this submission, and we can reference it so that it's on the record. The deputation, or not deputations, the submissions tend to be passive. And really it's the opposition members who go in, pull those out and bring them into debate. The government has already made it so we only have, I think, 25 minutes on the other side of committee to even be able to discuss what we heard. And so they're truncating this. It's wild. Make your submissions, copy it to Joel so that we have it in front of us and can use it during committee time. And then the other thing I would say is what I said earlier. I would go to your municipal leaders, whether you think it's a progressive council or council member, but I mean, everybody should have an understanding of what the potential is in their own community and what their neighbors and constituents feel. And I would put it to them, like, how are you going to deal with this? Like, what are you going to say to the premier? AMO, the Association of Municipalities of Ontario, they have talked about this being a significant overreach, like stay in your own lane, Doug Ford, right? So we're not alone. It's not, it's not only bicycle riders who have an opinion. It's municipalities who say, get the heck out of here. We make our own, planning decisions. So push back in different avenues. This is going through, but I don't know what it will look like on the other side. This bill will pass, but what they rip out, if they end up in a mess, if they realize it's going to be too expensive, if it was more of a promise to some of their donors heading into an election that never actually comes to pass, I don't know. But I would stay on it. And if any of you have conservative or government members around you, I won't use the word harass them. That's not the right word. Stay on them, because a lot of people come to New Democrats because we ride bikes or we meet with real people, or we take Saturdays because we actually want to learn from our neighbors, right? Go to the government members and ask them why they're not doing those things, and put it to them and make their lives also uncomfortable, because ultimately they're the ones in those rooms that can apply pressure to the premier directly, that we're limited. So that I would just hold them to account too, because they feel that it is very popular to rip out bike lanes, because that's what they've been told by the premier and his staff.
Yeah. Yeah,
So
no, absolutely. Absolutely. I see some activity in the chat there. Let me just pull it up. Sorry, Jen, did I interrupt you? Did you finish your thought?
I could talk for days. Interrupt me. And I was finished. Like, no.
Okay. I just wanted to make sure I wasn't abruptly cutting across you there. Now, Mike, you ask, but what about the developers and owners of high density housing along arterials who may lose an affordable option to get to work without a car? We have seen this already, and in meetings that Allison has hosted, Allison, like Mayor of Toronto, Allison has hosted. We have heard from advocates in the city of Toronto that have worked with developers who are as upset about this as we are. They are building infrastructure and housing that relies not upon parking. There's not a lot of parking in these buildings as they're being built. It relies on transit and it relies on active transportation. So yes, we are building those. We're not being given a lot of time by this government, but we are building those coalitions, and we're going to use them. We're going to use every single person that we can that wants to speak sense into this bill. And even if they ram this bill through, there is going to be community opposition to this because it's unpopular. It's unpopular. I also want to say where my okay, hold on. You can, yeah. So for Karen, who's saying in the chat, can you get it to Joel? Yep. Staff have put Ethan and Ty have put contact information for me, Karen. So please send it to me. That is one. And Ethan, thank you for keeping up to my rapid fire requests. You will see Ethan has posted where you can tune in to the hearings. Jen has talked about the app and a step-by-step guide that Ethan lovingly designed so you can figure out your way to submit your thoughts to committee members. Ian, to answer your question, yes, all opposition members are opposing the bill. Ashland Clancy from the Greens, Mary Margaret McMahon from the Liberals, and ourselves, we are going to be there opposing this bill because they're not listening to us. I mean, let's imagine a nice scenario in which they make amendments that make the bill much better. You always want to hope for the best, but we are preparing for the worst at the same time. I also want to just say, insofar as where we're going from here, this is one moment in this road safety conversation, and it's important that we acknowledge that we do have momentum on our side. They're in hurry up mode for a reason. We have some momentum on our side. So Jess, I feel compelled to throw it back to you so you can talk to what the road safety debate looks like now compared to when you started advocating after what happened to you in 2015. Like, are you seeing the numbers? Are they where they were in 2015, or how many people are you seeing active and paying attention to this now?
Yeah, it's the thing that keeps me moving forward is it has grown so massively, and it's been such a pleasant surprise. I can speak from the Toronto perspective, and I'm so sorry that everything in this province is so Toronto centric.
We like Toronto and Oshawa. It's all good. One
But
province.
the installation of complete streets since even 2020 has been life-changing for me personally. I'm now able to ride my bike everywhere. I've lost 20 pounds because I was driving everywhere before all this went in. So it's been amazing for my health. It's reduced pain. And to see, like, as you mentioned, the hundreds, if not over 1,000 people who came to the bike rally in October in front of Queen's Park was amazing. We've seen like a real growth in this, and I think it's only going to get bigger. This is a battle that is going to be won. We are going to win this. It's only a matter of time, hopefully less time and not more time, but everything is on our side. Facts are on our side. The climate emergency is on our side. Efficiency is on our side. Good governance, cost savings, public health, individual and population level health improvements. Everything is on the side of active transportation and safe streets. So I have a lot of hope for the future, but this current moment is very irritating and difficult, I will say. So thanks to everyone who came out and for all the support and for the political support from you MPPs. It's helps make this easier to get through and gives us the power to get our voices heard.
Yeah. Oh, Ethan is telling me, Karen, you haven't had a chance to speak and I haven't recognized you yet. So over to you. My apologies, Karen.
Hi there. I just wanted to ask if I just wrote a question as well, like besides making the comments, going to the rallies, letting our family and friends know about this and putting this on social media, are there any other things we can do to fight this bill?
Jess has an idea. Jen has an idea. Who's first? Rock, paper, scissors.
yes.
All right.
A helper in our more Toronto-based coalition, although it is Ontario-wide, did a really great analysis of the winning vote margins for every Conservative MPP, and there's a whole lot of them that are just barely in there. So something else you can do is, if you have friends and families scattered across the province in Conservative ridings, is ask them to make a call and write a letter, because they're vulnerable out there. There's a lot of vulnerable MPPs, and even if they win a majority again, we can do some grassroots organizing to make sure it's a much smaller majority and chip away. Although, another note of hope, the last time a Conservative provincial government called a premature election for funsies, it blew up in their face. So let's hope that happens this time too.
Jen.
So if I were not an MPP, but knowing what I know, and I've been doing this work for 10 years, if people showed up to community offices, to MPPs' offices, with their bikes or their kids or their grandkids, how many of you are retired? If any of you have, not just, I've never met a retiree who has free time, but if people were to show up at constituency offices and just said, hi, I want to meet with so-and-so. Oh, they're not here. Well, let me stay and tell you why I'm here today. And these are the things I'm concerned about. Oh, when can I come back? Well, should I come back tomorrow? Same time? Okay. And just like, honestly, just that kind of thing, you would have the staff at the community offices calling the MPP at Queen's Park and being like, what the heck am I supposed to do? I can't get anything done. I have this chatty lady who wants to tell me about her e-bike. Like, solve this. I got work to do. And I'm not to diminish it, but it's honestly like, if you are there, like, a petition is passive and it matters. But if you kind of walked in like, hi, I've been getting my neighbors to sign this petition. Will the government member take it in and read it in the legislature or table it for me? And what else can I do? And can I meet with them? And well, when can I meet? Well, I'll bring like that kind of thing. Not that everything has to be lovely and pleasant, but if you keep showing up, or you have a meetup that's like, hey, we're going for a bike ride, but we're starting at your office and want to invite you along, or come on out and talk to us, and like, or we'll be back in an hour. Are you going to be here? Like, they will just be like, oh my God, this is too much. Make it stop. And, they're probably going to rise early if I'm not a betting woman, but it's their pattern. We've got winter recess and they'll probably rise early. We may end up with, the government calling an early election, as we've all heard, but we've got time. And I haven't seen snow yet where I am. I mean, Ottawa, probably you've had snow for months. Just kidding. But I do think that, go to other MPPs and just be like, I haven't heard your voice on this. What is it you're going to say? What do you need from me to help come for a bike ride with me? I've got an extra bike. I've got a friend. Come with us. And post about it. Like, oh, they said they won't go for a ride with me. Like, push. The optometrist did this to us. I've never seen such an aggressive campaign as the optometrist a couple of years ago, with seniors and neighbors who were like, this isn't right or fair. And they just descended on us, and it got resolved. Mm-hmm. So it's descend upon and humanize it for them, because right now they're really in ivory towers and in Escalades. Like, they have no idea.
I wholeheartedly agree. I also just want to acknowledge, for folks I didn't acknowledge, who posted in the chat. I appreciate, where am I? I believe it was Steve. Oh no, it was in the Q&A. Pardon me. So many boxes to watch here. Oh yeah, Steve, who put in a lot here about very similar discussions we've had about the importance of segregated bike infrastructure. Albert Cole, who I've had the pleasure of hearing hold forth in advocacy meetings, talking about whether or not the government could be compromised to the extent that we would push them to make sure that they wouldn't remove bike lanes that weren't on arterial roads. I think all of this debate and all of this collision of ideas will inevitably, if they decide to compromise, involve some sort of compromise. And if they won't compromise at committee or in the House, they're going to have to compromise when they work with the municipality. Certainly Mayor Chow has sent that signal loud and clear, and I'm hoping Mayor Sutcliffe does the same. Maddie, you're saying, and I think it's a very valuable point, do we think this bill is a distraction? of resources and attention from other things the Ford government is doing. That's something I've heard a lot of people say. Absolutely true. And Claire, you write, to build on Jennifer's points about end results in the comments from others, I am someone who is more likely to buy a car and start driving more and therefore add to gridlock if bike lanes were removed. If there are fewer bike lanes, I won't feel safe enough to bike with the current state of transit. Don't get people in Ottawa talking about transit. It would take forever to do all errands and commuting on transit. I don't want to lose all that time, and I would seriously consider buying another car. Well, there you go. And that is the flow of decisions the government, I think, unfortunately, is asking people to entertain. But what I want to end, this is a really good note on which to end, I think. Jen's point about advocacy and being direct with your MPP, particularly if it's a Conservative member. If you want to come and have a tea in our office, you're always welcome. But the fact of the matter is, we need to get the government to move. And we can do that. We have seen it before. We saw the government back down on the Greenbelt. We saw the government back down with the education workers in 2022, mobilizing in that huge purple army all over Ontario, the custodians, the library techs, the ECEs, the EAs. They talk some sense of these guys, but it's going to take some time. And they are gearing towards what they hope to be, the rumor is, some kind of an election in the new year, soon in the new year. So now is the time to be awake and to be active and to push. So I want to thank from the bottom of my heart everybody who's made time for this conversation today. Jess, Jen, Ty, Ethan, for setting it all up. Thank you so much. And Allison, for real, thank you for everything you're doing in the Toronto hub of this to connect all of the people down there, because that makes a big, big, big difference. Great to see friends from places like Peterborough and Guelph joining the conversation this morning. And yes, absolutely, you can expect all opposition parties at committee and in the House to be aligned on this. This is where we're at. We are all trying to talk sense into this government. Pray for us. Okay. But look, be well. Try to think of something you can do today to give some hope. When we're getting around our communities, this is something I was thinking yesterday when I was running around. I often like to try to get into conversations with drivers about nothing at all, just to provide some banter and to provide some kindness to the street, because we have a lot of people on talk radio and a lot of people, in meme machines trying to ramp people up. So we can play our own part, is my point that I'm making as we end, to offer some kindness to this province, because that is what being Canadian means to me. Certainly, it's about walking into a space with good intent, and when you meet somebody that doesn't have it, you confront it with some kindness, and we find our way out. So, respect for everybody being here. Thanks again, Ethan and Ty, for helping to set all this up. Be well. Take care, everybody.